chat for you that we'll be utilizing later in the presentation, but they're examples of scenarios of this scenario that we'll use at that time. Otherwise, you'll probably know that we've extended this twice now, recognizing from the first training that we didn't have enough time for questions at the end. And then we did a run through of this and noticed we still didn't have enough time with an hour and a half. So we put it at 2, not knowing if we'll need that total time, but we want to make sure we can answer questions if need be. All right, I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to continue to go through the presentation. There may be some questions that pop up in the chat. I won't be able to see those. So either we will answer them if Heather or Stephanie let me know, or we will answer them at the end of the presentation. All right, so today is training number 2 on the ICAP. We're going to be working with section D of the adaptive behavior. We did the first part a couple weeks ago, and we'll finish up with problem behavior in a couple weeks also. So starting today, we will just talk about the mission of DDD, which is to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have equal opportunities and receive the services and supports they need to live and work in South Dakota communities. So as we mentioned before, the ICAP is utilized as an assessment to look at the adaptive and problem behaviors of individuals and determine and ascertain what kind of supports and assistance that person may need, and maybe what kind of and the amount of assistance that they may need for a person with an intellectual or developmental disability, with the goal for them to be as independent as they can be. So the adaptive behavior, and I guess the definition that we'll go with today is to be able to meet what social and community expectations are out there for people that live in our society and world today. So some of those areas are we're looking at their ability to be independent, and we're looking at them to be able to maintain physical needs, and we're looking at people to be able to accept the norms that are set by society, and to also interact and have interpersonal relationships. So we're assessing their daily living skills and their and that person's awareness of when to perform those skills. So it's not only just them being able to do the skill, but able to be aware that they need to do that skill. Okay, so the adaptive behavior section that we will be working with today has 77 total items, and they're going to encompass a wide range of different types of behaviors or skills that will talk about their adaptive ability. They are spaced out according to difficulty. So they'll start each section with more simple and end with more difficult. And what we hope to be able to accomplish with completing the ICAP is to, first of all, assess their eligibility for DDD services in both our family support and choices waiver, but also we're looking at changes that that person may encounter. So we not only do the initial eligibility, but we're doing an annual look at that ICAP to see if there is some maturation of that individual, if they have gained some skill over time, if they have had some specific training or education that helps them gain that skill. And then on the other side of that is to see if there's any deterioration of the individual as they age, or if they've had an injury or an illness that has affected those adaptive skills. So ideally, people learn these adaptive skills in sequential order, and like I said, that's how they are ordered in these sections. In order of difficulty, of course. And sometimes people are able to learn in that order, but sometimes the learning is uneven. And that can be especially true with people who have physical disabilities, people with emotional disorders. And then we also know that if over time, for example, if a person has a stroke, they may have trouble with their communicating, but their other skills are maybe more advanced. So we do know that. So throughout this adaptive behavior section of the ICAP, we will be looking at 4 key areas. The first will be the motor skills. The second will be the social and communication skills. The third will be the personal living skills, and the fourth will be community living skills, and of course, questions and prompts within each of those sections. We also have a different type of scoring than we did on the original part of the ICAP. So this is going to give you the option of 4 different, 4 levels basically on how they are able to accomplish the task. And so we're looking at how they are currently able to complete it without help or supervision. And we're looking to score them based on what best describes their performance on each of those tasks. We know that 3 will be their highest rating and 0 will be their lowest. And we're going to talk about each one of those. So for 0, that means they never or rarely are able to do this task that's presented to them. So this is, again, based on their independence, how they're able to accomplish on their own, knowing when to do it, and having the willingness to do it. So if the person or the individual, if whatever skill is presented to them, whatever prompt is up there, and they're never or rarely, it's beyond their current level of skill or is unsafe for them, so they would get a 0 if that is what we can estimate for them. If they're never or rarely able to perform it without the help of being asked, or they're never or rarely able to perform the task, again, because it's not safe for them to do so. An individual may score a 1, which would be if we're going up on level or ability to do that, meaning they sometimes are able to perform that task without help, but they're not doing it very well, but they're able to do it sometimes. It is acceptable for the person to be asked to do the task, to start that task. And it's important to recognize that they're performing it about 25% of the time. So of all the times that they're needing to do this task or skill or behavior, they're out of all of those times that it's presented to them, 25% of those times are they able to do it. And 25% of the time they're able to do it without help or supervision. So the next highest level of score would be a 2, meaning they're doing it fairly well when presented with it. Again, it's important to acknowledge that it is acceptable for the person to be asked or prompted to begin the task. They are able to complete it without help or supervision. They're able to do all the tasks in the prompt, but they aren't necessarily being able to master that skill. And again, if we're looking at all of the times that they're asked or this task is initiated or this skill is initiated, they're able to perform it about 75% of the time. And then finally, if we move into a score of 3, meaning they do it very well. They're able to complete it independently. They have either mastered the skill or the skill has become too easy for them to do. They also are very aware of when it is necessary for the task or skill to be done, and they are not asked or reminded to do it. So of all, yeah, we'll move on from there. Some considerations for you when scoring. Again, you're only marking one response. You're looking, if you're not able to see or observe that the individual has been able to do the skill or task based on the fact that there hasn't been the opportunity or the responsibility to do it, you're being asked to estimate based on how well. So if you haven't been able to see it because they haven't been given the opportunity or responsibility, what would you estimate they're able to do that? You might look at other skills that are similar, and so you might be able to base your estimation on that performance. Sometimes people aren't given the opportunity or responsibility because they have a restriction in place. So again, we're estimating because of that. And then if we're looking at sometimes the prompts say simple, clean, or appropriate. A lot of times you'll see appropriate. If they're able to do that or consider it approximate based on how the developmental level of this item for individuals without a disability. So you're basing it on that, the approximation. So additional scoring considerations is if we look at differentiating between adaptive and maladaptive behaviors, because that can be very important during this assessment. You should be paying attention to how much prompting is necessary in order for that skill to be, or behavior or task to be done. If you know that they don't have the skill, if you know that the person has the skill but is choosing not to or refusing to do it when necessary, you would score that as a 0. A refusal, again, it's important to note this. You may be needing to address that in the problem behavior section, which we will talk about next training, if an intermediate intervention is necessary for them to accomplish that task. Also important to recognize that the lack of the skill is due to their intellectual disability, or their age, if it is so, is not we're making sure that those are not a part of the problem behavior. Again, some more scoring considerations, and this is also an important item, is when they're using adaptive equipment. So if they're independently using that equipment to complete one of the tasks, then you would score the item as they're able to do it, as they're able to perform it. If they do or are supposed to be using the equipment, the adaptive equipment, but they're refusing to do it, or refusing to use that adaptive equipment to complete that task, then you would score it based on how they would perform that task without that equipment being in use. We do know that alternative forms of communication methods are utilized by the people that we support. Sometimes they're using a type of formal sign language. You can consider that as equivalent to speaking. You can use they can use a communication device, and it can be considered equivalent to speaking if that communication board has contains many words, or has the availability of many words that are able to combine at some point for a unique sentence. So that would be when you could consider a communication device as equivalent to speaking. If the individual is more likely to point or use symbols or gesture, that can be considered equivalent to speaking at certain times, and that is when they are able to combine those gestures or symbols to form So if they're able to form a simple sentence. So for an example, if they're asking a question with symbols or gestures or pointing to words, I should say, if they're able to combine that in some way that it comes out as a question, so they might be able to point to like the word who, and then they might be able to point to jacket. So they're trying to communicate that whose jacket is that. So that's what we're looking for, is when it can be used as an equivalent to speaking. More considerations for you is when you're scoring, it should be based on their independent performance. If they, for example, if they've never been asked to perform that task or skill, you could demonstrate it once before you ask them to do it. So that would be acceptable. If there are additional tasks, and you'll see that in some of the questions or prompts, there are several in that one. So if they can do all of the parts well, then we're going to score it a 3. However, they're able to complete 2, but not a third a part of the task, then we're going to score it based on the weakest part of the task. So for example, if we are looking at this one, folds a letter into 3 equal sections and seals it in an envelope, they would need to do all of those. If they were only able to fold it into equal sections but not able to put it in the envelope, we're going to score it based on the weakest part of that task, which would be the envelope. We're looking at quality of the task completed and not necessarily the frequency of it when we're scoring. All right, and so for our first section is motor skills. So we're looking at the very first one would be picks up small objects with one hand. So that's the ability to use like that pincher grasp to be able to pick up a small object, excuse me. For example, if they're picking up an M&M, they'll be able to use that pincher grasp to do that. They do not need to have full usage of both hands to complete this task. If they're only using one hand to be able to do this, then you're going to rate it on the use of that one hand. The next one would be transfer small objects from one hand to the other hand. So what we're looking at in this one is the person being able to be coordinated enough to bring one hand to the other to transfer that object. So if I'm taking that piece of candy, that M&M I just talked about, and I picked it up with my pincher grasp, and I can transfer it to the other hand, then we would be able to score that pretty high. So if the person has a limited ability of one hand, we know that they can at least do that with one hand, and they can at least transfer it to the other hand. We know, even though it might not be perfect or look exactly right, it would be at least a 1. You do not need to see that person, and we not need to know if once they've transferred it to the other hand, that they transfer it back again. It just has to be able to go one way of that transfer for it to be scored. The next one would be sits alone for 30 seconds with head and back held straight and steady. And we're looking at that without support. All right. We know that there are some things that help support an individual, but we're looking for that without that support and how we're going to score this item. When we move on to number 4, if we know that individual can stand alone for at least 5 seconds, then we know that they're able to sit alone for 30 seconds. So we could mark that, we would then be able to mark 3 a 3 because they were able to do that skill. They do not need to hold perfectly still. and they don't necessarily have to have correct posture, as one might see, like with the feet on the floor, back straight against the chair. What we're looking for again is that they're able to hold their head and back straight for without that support for 30 seconds. So we started talking about number 4 because these two kind of go well together. Stands alone, stands for at least 5 seconds by holding onto furniture or other objects. So if the person is able to independently support themselves in a standing position, we know that they're, of course, going to score a 3. They're not using any type of support at that time. If they're able to support themselves with the use of a cane or walker or other adaptive device, that score would then be a 0. Okay, so not needing any type of assistance down to needing those types of devices, the cane walker, then it would be a 0. But if they're holding on to furniture, you're going to rate it or score it based on that. Number 5, when they pull themselves into a standing position. So we're talking about from the floor. So is the person able to pull themselves in a standing position from the floor? They are able to use their hands or arms or hands to pull themselves by using a chair, a table, a couch, some other item to pull themselves up from the floor. That is acceptable. Number 6, put small objects into containers and takes them out again. So we're talking about objects that are tended to use these items across all environments on a day-to-day basis. So that might be, we might be talking about their food, taking it out of a container that their food is stored in. Maybe it is something they use to get ready for their day, and then they're taking it out of that. But they're able to taking it out of some type of container, and that's happening over multiple environments, across environments. Number 7, stands alone and walks for at least 6 feet. Is the person able to stand without assistance from another person and walk for at least 6 feet? Then they would be rated or scored of a 3 on that one. That if they are using adaptive equipment, they can be utilizing those, such as a cane or walker, but we're going to rate it based on or score it based on what they're using and how they're using it. Number 8, scribbles or marks with pencil or crayon on a sheet of paper. So what we need to make sure that the person doesn't need to be able to obtain it, the item, to use the scribble or mark. That's not part of the task. The task here is if they have the ability to pick up a pen or paper and use it. If they don't have the physical ability to pick up a pen, then we would score them as a 0. So it's important to notice this one's going to also connect to item number 14, which is print's first name, copying from an example. If on number 14 they score 1, 2, or 3, then they should be able to score 1, 2, or 3 on this item. So that's something important to make sure those scores correlate. And finally, for this slide, removes the wrappings from small objects such as gum or candy. Number 10, turns knob or handle and opens a door. This is the requirement for this one, is that they are able to turn the knob and open the door. And so again, if those are 2 items or 2 sets of directions in one prompt, so they need to do all of those to score a 3 on that one. However, if they're only able to open the door but not able to turn it, we would rate it or score it on the weakest part of that one. If a knob isn't available for them, you're trying to assess whether they can do this, you can use another type of comparable task, such as opening a bottle top or a jar lid, because that's at that twisting motion. Number 11, walks up and down stairs by alternating feet. That's important, the alternating of the feet from step to step. And they can hold on to the handrail. Okay, so that's important to know. They can use that, but we're alternating feet. Number 12, climbs a 6-foot ladder. That is the next item to look at. If they've never had that opportunity to use a ladder, it's just never been presented to them, you might need to make your best judgment upon their ability based on number 11, which is walking up and down the stairs, that balance piece. If they can, of course, use their hands to grasp the side of the ladder as they climb. And if they do, and they're going alternating foot step by step, then they would score a 3 on that one. They may score a 0 if the person does not have the ability to climb the ladder or it's unsafe for them to do so. A 1 might be scored if they have the physical ability to climb the ladder but will not attempt due to fear of heights or climbing. They may score a 2 if that person climbs the ladder but only does so with the prompts to continue to do so. And a 3, of course, if they climb the ladder or if they've used the handles to climb the ladder. Number 13, cuts with scissors along a thick, straight line. So if the individual is presented with a piece of paper and they're able to cut along that thick line, then we can score it in this way. So a 0, of course, would be given if they're not able to use the scissors or they can't cut the paper at all. If they're within a 1/2 inch of the line while they're cutting, they would get a 1. If they're within a 1/4 inch of the line, they'd get a 2. And if they're about 1/8 on either side of the line, you could score them a 3 for that pass. All right, number 14, prints first name, copying from an example. So the individual is given an example of their first name, and they're able to copy that correctly. If they're able to do that, then they would score a 3, of course. If they're able to do that in cursive, we would say they've mastered the printing skills. So this would be a score of 3. Number 15, picks up and carries a full paper bag of groceries at least 20 feet and sets it down without using handles. So they don't need to do this from the floor. They don't need to pick it up from the floor. They just have to be able to pick it up. If you don't have a grocery bag with handles, you could use comparable items or tasks such as using a laundry basket or a box. If the individual uses a wheelchair independently and is able to pick up the bag of groceries off a counter or the box off a counter and places it on their lap or tray and is able to maneuver their wheelchair, then they would receive a score of 3 on that one. We kind of already talked about number 16, which is fold a letter into 3 equal sections and seals that envelope. And remember, they have to do all of those tasks. And you may need to demonstrate, again, if they've never had to do this before, because this is one task that kind of died out since we use a lot of social media and texting. But if a person is able to fold the sheet of paper into 3 equal sections and seals it in an envelope, then that would be the 3. Does not require perfection in folding the letter in 3 equal sections. But it needs to be able to fit into a legal size envelope. So that first part doesn't need to be a perfect fold in 3 equal sections, but it has to be able to fit into the envelope. So if a person can do the folding but is unable to get it into the envelope due to some physical disability, then we would mark this one or score this as a 0. All right, to thread a sewing needle is our number 7. They don't need to know how to use the needle once it's threaded. They just need to know how to get it threaded. If they utilize a needle threader to accomplish this, that would be that can occur, and it would be scored with that use of that as an adaptive device. So a score of 0 would occur if the person cannot thread the needle. Score of 1 would occur if the person threads the needle after 5 attempts. They would receive a score of 2 if they thread the needle after 3 attempts. And they would score the 3 if they can thread that needle on an average needle, they can thread it. Number 18 assembles objects that have at least 10 small parts that must be screwed or bolted together. And an example of this one might be unassembled toys or furniture. So the task does not include that they have to disassemble the item. It is scored based on their ability to assemble it together. And it is a skill that should apply to people across all environments on a day-to-day basis. And the assembly includes more than one object. So using screws or bolts and tools, a screwdriver, plier, or wrench, something like that. So our next section is social and communication. This is that social interaction, the ability to comprehend language and express language. It's going to be occurring over various settings, and the individual being understand the language, being able to verbally express it, looking at written symbols, oral expression, or a written language. And the first one in this section, make sounds or gestures to get attention. So this is the earliest stage of communication that we know of. And they may be using those sounds or gestures to get that attention from the person they're seeking out. Number 2, reach for a person whom he or she wants, reaches for a person for whom he or she wants. So they're trying to basically engage another person for a response. So it might be something as a physical reach. We know that if the person is able to communicate verbally, that they have mastered this skill. So we can score this 3. Number 3 on this section, turns head to speaker when a name is called. If we know if they are able to speak, they have mastered this skill. But when the person does not have the physical ability to turn his or her head to acknowledge the speaker, they may use sounds, gestures, or smiles when their name is called. Then we would score that as a 3 because they're not able to physically move their head, but they are acknowledging that their name is being called through. Then we would score that a 3. If they're hearing impaired, but they do look towards that person who is waving to or trying to get their attention, then we would score that a 3 also. Number 4, imitates actions when asked, such as waving or clapping hands. This is a pre-verbal skill and an early socialization skill. If the person is verbally able to communicate, then we could say that they have mastered the skill and would score them a 3. Number 5, hands, toys, or other objects to another person. We're focusing on the skill of sharing and interacting. We already looked at the transfer and the motor skills, but now we're looking at that sharing. So if a person hands an object, such as like a book or another item, to someone else, the score is 3. If they do not have the cognitive skill to interact with another person in this type of manner, we would score it as 0. Number 6, shakes head or otherwise indicates yes or no in response to a simple question such as, do you want some milk? So this skill will be scored based on the person's knowledge of the difference between yes and no. The person may also overtly indicate yes or no through other means. For example, they might use a gesture or pushing away or reaching towards, accepting or not accepting. If the person's use of yes, no answers are not used in a consistent manner, the score should reflect how often the response matches the person's actual answer. So if they're not, if, for example, if the person is shaking their head no, but they reach for the glass and the drinks, we would score them based on how that consistent, how often that they would do that. Their actual answer. Number 7 points to familiar pictures in a book on request. So these are common objects that might be found in a book, magazine, or communication device. And they would be able to point towards those familiar objects. Number 8 says at least 10 words that can be understood by someone who knows him or her. So this person is able to say 10 words to communicate his or her wants and needs or to get another person's attention. They do not have to be in, these words do not have to be in consecutive order or form a complete sentence. But the scoring scale should be referenced to determine an appropriate score for people who communicate 10 words by unique sign language or a code of language. But if so, in order for meaning to be gained from that, and a support person must step in, that would be, the score would be based on that. So a score of 3, for example, would be given if the person can communicate at least 10 words through sign language, or a person understands and selects from among more than 10 symbols on a communication device. So number 9, ask simple question. For example, what's that? So the individual is able to start a sentence or a question by using like what, where, why, or how. They can use the use of sign language or communication device if the communication device or their sign language has enough symbols to allow the person to ask questions by putting words or symbols together. So they have to be able to put it together. Number 10 speaks in 3 or 4 word sentences. They have the cognitive communicative abilities to interact in a two-way conversation, speaking in simple sentences. The use of sign language can occur or a communication device is appropriate if the person is able to use enough symbols to make sentences which are understandable. If they're asked to repeat the sentence more than occasionally, then that would not be a score of 3. Number 11, waits at least 2 minutes for turn in a group activity. So examples might be taking turns getting a drink of water. So the scoring is based on the individual understanding the concept of taking turns when playing a game or waiting in line. If the person either just continues to wait in line until someone directs them to do the next step or cuts right in front of the line, then that person would not receive a score of 3. Number 12, offers to help other people. For example, holding a door open or picking up an object. This item is measuring the person's social awareness to recognize the needs of others and is not based solely on their ability to physically do it. So we're looking at whether they recognize the need. The person can offer to help. They can try to find somebody who can physically assist, or they can offer some type of verbal support. If the person has limited physical capacity to offer assistance, the score should be based on the person's skill to recognize the needs of others and provide assistance as they are able. Number 13, acts appropriately without drawing negative attention while in public places with friends. This might occur at the library or a movie theater. So this item is focusing on the person's understanding of the social expectations in the variety of environments. If the person does not have the skill to understand the appropriate social behavior, the score is a 0. When their behavior is consistent with the social expectations without prompts, the score is 3. Number 14, responds appropriately to most common signs, printed words, or symbols. Stop, men, women, danger are some of those examples. If this individual knows at least 10 common signs, words, or symbols, and also has the skill to respond accordingly in both familiar and unfamiliar environments, then they would get a 3. Number 15, summarizes and tells a story so that it is understood by someone else. This can be a story that they have heard, they have seen on TV or in a movie. So we're looking at the person's ability to tell the story in chronological order so that is understandable to an unfamiliar person. The measurement is not based on appropriate grammar. If the person providing the assessment or conducting the assessment must help the person with prompts to complete the story or to provide more detail so that the story is understandable, the score is not a 3. Consider the number of prompts or questions the person needs in order to tell that story and reference that when you're scoring it. Number 16, locates or remembers the telephone numbers and calls friends on the telephone. So the person that's being assessed is able to use the phone to call and or text people such as friends, relatives, or support staff. The phone numbers may be in a contact list or written list or in some other format accessible. They can be in that. Number 17, writes, prints, or types understandable and legible notes for letters for mailing, or for legible notes or letters for mailing. It has to be created by the individual, it has to be legible, and it must be understandable to the person reading it. This can be done through texting, email, or other social media, and it cannot be copied from somebody else's notes. Something else somebody else wrote. Number 18, locates needed information in the telephone yellow pages or the want ads. So we need to be able to assess whether this person can generalize the skill in more than one situation. So they might be looking up a restaurant, they might be trying to be able to determine who can clean their carpets. And because these items, the yellow pages or want ads, are not necessarily part of our world right now, they can use websites or community news advertisements, something like that. Number 19, calls a repair service or the caretaker if something major breaks, such as a furnace or the refrigerator, and it breaks down in the home. So what we're looking for here is the individual's ability to recognize that something is in need of repair and takes the steps to get the item fixed. So it also must include the appropriate time frame based on the urgency of the repair. So for example, you would want to make sure your refrigerator is repaired before the dishwasher because the food would go bad. They have to be able to call the appropriate person, caretaker, landlord, or maintenance, not their support staff, and know when to make the call. They have to be able to generalize the skill to more than one situation. And the score is a 0 if the person verbalizes the skill but does not follow through to get the item repaired. And we would want this not scored based on only one situation. It would be over a few. Okay, our next section is personal living skills. This is personal care, domestic skills, being able to maintain somewhat of a organized lifestyle and living environment, that they're able to meet the everyday demands for personal independence and autonomy. The first one in this section is swallow soft foods. The scores would be something like this, a 0 if they're not able to swallow the food of consistency of a baby food. If it's pureed, pudding, applesauce, mashed bananas. If they're not able to swallow, then that would be a 0. If they're fed through a feeding tube, that would be a 0. Score 1 based on this is all based on a swallowing evaluation. The person has difficulty swallowing food, the consistency of baby food. Staff must be present to provide prompts to swallow between each bite of food. Now they'd score 2, also again based on a swallowing evaluation. If the person has difficulty swallowing the food, the consistency of baby food. And that they must have staff present to provide focused prompts as needed to take a drink, swallow, wait, or follow through with other recommendations from the evaluation to more than one person at mealtimes. Score of a 3, they can swallow the food of consistency of ground, chopped, and bite size, and other baby food consistency. Number 2, picks up and eats food such as crackers. They must pick up the food and eat them. If the person uses utensils or can use utensils, we would say they have mastered the skill of being able to pick that food up with their fingers, and they would score a 3. Number 3, holds out arms and legs while being dressed. The person needs to be able to complete both components of this item, arms and legs. If the person dresses him or herself, we would say they have mastered the skill and they would score a 3. If they have a physical disability limiting full extension of his or her left leg and independently holds out arms and legs to the best of their ability, then we would give them a score of 3. Number 4, holds hands under running water to wash them when placed in front of a sink. This is the first step in the process of learning how to turn the water, knowing how to wash hands, and does not require that the person know how to turn the water faucet on or off. They would score a 3 if, when in front of a sink, the person can extend his or her hands under the faucet as they're prepared for someone else to wash their hands. Or if a person with physical use of only one hand can independently place that hand under running water. Number 5, eat solid foods with a spoon with little spilling. The person is able to get most of the food in their mouth using a spoon. It can be an adaptive spoon. If they are utilizing a fork, then we would say they have the skill and they've mastered it and would score a 3. Personal living skills. Still on this one, number 6, they stay dry for at least 3 hours. So this is a pre-toileting skill. It demonstrates the person's ability to control their bladder for at least 3 hours. Now, if they're on a schedule for toileting for every 2 hours, this is not always a good indication that a person cannot control their bladder for at least 3 hours. So they may be dry in 2 hours. And so there is a possibility that they could make it till 3. If they're always wet when they're being changed after 2 hours, then we would say they are not able to do that for 3 hours. Number 7, removes pants and underpants. This measures only the person's skill to remove the clothing, not to put them back on. Number 8, uses the toilet at regular times when placed on the toilet or when taken to the bathroom. If they regularly use, when they regularly use the bathroom, and or if they're placed on the toilet and they use the bathroom regularly, then that would be a 3. If the person uses incontinence supplies throughout the day, the score, of course, would be a 0, regardless of whether their supplies are wet or dry when taken to the bathroom. Number 9, puts on a t-shirt or pullover shirt, although it may be on backwards. So this is one of the first steps in learning how to dress oneself. It does not require that the shirt must be right side out or facing the correct way. Number 10, uses the toilet, including removing and replacing clothing with no more than 1 accident per month. This is several parts to this one, and we're focusing on how many accidents the person has when he or she uses the toilet independently. If the person uses the toilet but does not remove and replace clothing, we would rate it on the weakest part of that, so on the ability to remove and replace clothing. Person receives a score of 0 if they're incontinent at night, and if there's more than 1 accident of incontinence, which is not related to behavioral reasons. The individual would score 1 when incontinence is determined to be purposeful and a behavioral issue. But we base it on the score. We would score it based on the frequency of incontinence. Score of 2 when incontinence is determined to be purposeful and behavioral issue, and again based on the frequency of the incontinence. A score of 3, the person independently completes all parts of the item, uses the toilet, and replaces and removes clothing with no more than 1 accident per month. If item number 8, which was uses the toilet at regular times when placed on it, is scored as 0, then this item would also be scored as 0. Number 11, closes the bathroom door when appropriate before using the toilet. The individual needs to recognize the need for the privacy and ensure that the bathroom door is closed when somebody is present or in public or shared facilities. If they're unable to close the door due to physical limitations, but knows that the door should be closed for privacy, and asks someone to to close the door most of the time, then they would score a 2. If they request some of the times, they would give a 1. Number 12, dresses self completely and neatly, including shoes, buttons, belts, and zippers. They're able to dress appropriately and completely based on the social situation, environment, and weather from what is available within their wardrobe. So that neatly would describe zipping pants, buttoning buttons in the right holes. If applicable, not putting pants on backwards or shoes on the wrong feet. They are able to wear Velcro or slip-on shoes or elastic pants, and they would be considered dressed completely and neatly. We're scoring based on their day-to-day attire, not something out of the ordinary. Now, an example of a person wearing an AFO, they can dress himself or herself fully, but need assistance putting on shoes when wearing those, would score a 1. Does not do well because putting shoes on is one component of that task. Number 13, cuts food with a knife instead of trying to eat pieces that are too large. They can use a common table knife to do this. They're scoring it based on the fact that they're recognizing the pieces are too large to eat and can cut into smaller pieces. Cut in smaller pieces. Number 14, washes, rinses, and dries hair. They need to be able to do all parts of the task. If not, we're scoring on the weakest on this one. Towel drying would be sufficient for this part of the task. If you need to prompt the person to use an appropriate amount of shampoo, then it would not be a 3. They would score 0 if not able to complete any or part of the task. They would score 1 if the person washes and dries his or her hair, but does not rinse her hair well. They would score 2 if they washes and dries their hair, but needs occasional reminders or prompts. And score 3 would be completes all parts of the task without prompting. Number 15, washes and dries dishes and puts them away. They need to complete all parts again. Otherwise, we would be scoring on the weakest task. If you need to prompt the person to perform the task or use the appropriate amount of soap or use warm water, it would not be a score of 3. The weak dishes may be air dried but need to be put away, and they may use a dishwasher if used properly and the dishes are dried and put away, then they would score 3. Number 16, mixes and cooks simple foods such as scrambled eggs, soup, or hamburgers. So the person cooks simple foods which require mixing at least 2 ingredients together. Eggs, because you put in eggs and milk. You might have soup. If the person sets the appropriate temperature on the stove or microwave and determines when the food is done. If the person can read and follow directions to combine ingredients to cook prepackaged food in a microwave, the score is not a 0. It's based on the assistance and prompting needed. Number 17, cleans bedroom, including putting away clothes, changing sheets, dusting, and cleaning the floor. Again, all parts of this task, or you're scoring on the weakest part. So the person has to be able to make the decision when it is appropriate to clean. There is a latitude on the frequency at which the task is completed. If they're not able to complete any or part of the task, for example, they never change sheets, that item would be scored as 0. Okay. 18, prepares the shopping list for at least 6 items from a grocery store. This is measuring their ability to decide which item is needed based on their current supply. Does not require that the food items are nutritional. May purchase additional items that are not on their list. Does not require that the list be written on paper. They may use pictures for their lists. Number 19, loads and operates a washing machine using an appropriate setting and amount of detergent. All parts of the task must be completed, or the weakest task is scored. So I need to know how to operate the machine, use the appropriate settings, appropriate amount of clothing so the machine is not overloaded. If the options are pre-selected and this person does not know how to operate the machine, the score is not a 3. They would score 0 if they're not able to complete any one part of the task. Score 1 if the person can perform the task but need extensive prompting to complete. Score of 2 if the person can perform the task with minimal prompting. Score 3 if the person can load and operate machine without prompting and can transfer the skill to use on another washing machine. Number 20, plans, prepares, and serves a main meal for more than 2 people. The person needs to decide what and how much food to prepare and serve, including purchasing the ingredients. This does not require them serving more than just a main meal like a casserole or spaghetti. If the person plans and cooks prepackaged food in a microwave, such as lasagna, the score is not 0. It's based on the assistance and prompting needed. This item, number 20, should not have a score higher than the score on items 16 and 18. Number 21, repairs minor damage to clothing such as tears or missing buttons or arranges for those repairs outside the home. They need to be able to recognize that their clothing needs repair. They can either make the needed repair or arrange for it to be done by someone else and they need to ensure that they get it back repaired. Community living skills is our last section. We're looking at time, punctuality, money and value, work skills, community, home orientation. Number 1, finds toys or objects that are always kept in the same place. So we're measuring on their ability to find those belongings, such as shampoo or socks. Number 2, finds own way to a specified room when told to go. So if they were, for example, asked to wait in the kitchen, the score would be a 3 if they're the person is familiar with the area and can find his or her own way there when either asked or if they want to go there themselves. Number 3, indicates when a chore or assigned task is finished. So if they can independently move on to the next task or get more tasks, we can say that they have mastered this skill and they would score a 3 on this item. If they do not, the person does not have to verbalize that the task is finished, but they need to overtly let somebody know. That might be tapping somebody or checking something off. Or 4, stays in an unfenced yard for 10 minutes when expected without wandering away. This is measuring their cognitive ability to understand that they need to stay in the yard when expected without wandering away. This would be scored on their ability if given the opportunity. If they're never given the opportunity, we would still be scoring it on their ability to do. If they're not given the opportunity based on a restriction or something like that, we would score it on their ability to do it without that. Number 5, uses the words morning and night correctly. The person needs to know the difference between those and be able to speak the words. Oh, excuse me, they do not need to be able to speak the words. They just need to know that be able to indicate the difference. Trade something for money or another item of value. For example, trading one book for another. This is a pre-money usage skill. The trade does not need to be of an equal value, but they need to understand that they are not trading for nothing. Buys items, number 7, from a vending machine, like candy, milk, or pop. This is also a pre-money usage skill. Does not need to know the correct amount of money needed. Based on an observation that they're selecting from a vending machine that has more than one option. So provided with the correct amount of money, the person places it into the vending machine and can select an item. If the person receives a score of 3 on number 7, then a score of at least 1 should be indicated for number 6 because they're understanding they're trading that money for something else. 8, crosses nearby residential streets, roads, and unmarked intersections. They have the street safety skills to cross the street in their neighborhood. So the key phrase would be nearby residential. We're not talking about a downtown business area. If the person has the skill described but does not navigate his or her neighbor independently due to a rights restriction or mobility issues, the score would be a 1 or a 2. Number 9, buy specific items requested on an errand, although may not count change correctly. So they're able to navigate to complete the errand. It's not measuring their money skills. They need to be able to pick up more than one item to rescore of 3. And it should be not based on whether the items are brand specific, and familiarity with the environment is not a factor in the scoring. Receiving correct change back is also not a consideration. And they may select and purchase additional items. Number 10 states day, month, and year of birth. They would receive a 0, cannot state any of that correctly. A 1 can remember the day, month, and year of his or her birth only occasionally. Score 2 if they can remember almost always, and score 3 they can do it consistently. Number 11 uses a watch clock. uses a watch or a clock daily to do something at the correct time. Example, it might be catching a bus. They need to be able to tell time to score above a 0 on this item. If they're only able to read the numbers on a clock without the understanding of the concept of time, then the score would be 0. Number 12, correctly counts change from a $5 bill after making a purchase. If they cannot count that change up to $5, then the score is 0. The person must be able to determine the amount of change due back to him or her after making a purchase. This is a fundamental math skill and needed for addition and subtraction. If the item is scored as 0, then 15, 18, and 19 will also be scored as 0. 13, operates potentially dangerous electrical hand tools and appliances with moving parts. They might be using a drill or a food mixer. This is assessing their ability to recognize the risks associated with safely using various appliances and equipment. Again, we would be scoring based on the weakest part of the skill. So an example might be using oven mitts when removing items from the oven, turning pan handles away from the front of the stove, using non-metal kitchenware in the microwave. Community livings, we're on that same section, writes down if necessary and keeps appointments made at least 3 days in advance. So that's number 14. So if they're able to remember and keep a commitment made at least 3 days prior, they don't necessarily, if they write, what the person writes down the appointment or not does not impact the score. The person may arrive early or on time for the appointment, and they may arrive early. Number 15, budgets money to cover expenses for at least 1 week. That might be something like transportation. They need to be able to budget multiple expenses throughout the week to purchase necessary and other items as planned. If there is a formal support in place to assist with budgeting, the score, of course, would not be a 3. Number 16, works at a steady pace on a job for at least 2 hours. Score is based on the amount of prompting necessary for that person to stay on task and maintain focus for at least 2 hours on the job. Number 17, complete applications and interviews for jobs. This is an independent task that they complete applications. If they're able to do that and interview independently, they would receive a score of 3. 18, receive bills in the mail and pays them before they are overdue. If they are able to receive a bill and pay it independently before overdue, that can be either done by mailing a check or paying it online, they would score a 3. If using automatic payment options, the person must demonstrate the skill to set that auto pay up independently. And number 19, balances a checkbook monthly. If they have the skill to write checks, add deposits, and subtract debits and withdrawals in a checkbook register, and compare that balance to on a bank statement, then they would, and if they're able to identify any errors, they would score a 3. When using a debit card or any online banking, the person must have the skill to find and correct errors and manage his or her account independently without receiving overdrafts. If they're only receiving their account balance online, the item scored is 0. So we do have our information for questions, but I want to go ahead and look at our scenario very quickly. So I'm going to share that and we'll talk about that. So this scenario is for a person named Michelle Elkins. This was put in the chat, but we're going to go through this. So they, based on the information here, so Michelle lives in an apartment with her mother, Barbara. Michelle attends school in the transition program. She's been receiving Family Support 360 services. This is her annual review for eligibility. It was completed with Michelle, her mother, and her companion care provider because she wanted her companion care provider there. Michelle and her mother were sitting in the waiting area of her apartment when I arrived to greet her. Michelle stood up and walked towards me. I introduced myself to both Michelle and her mother. Michelle said hi. I asked if she could show me her apartment, and she agreed. As we walked up the stairs, I accidentally dropped the ICAP kit I was carrying. Michelle stood by and watched as I picked up the items and placed them back in the container. When we reached her apartment, Michelle opened the door and asked if I wanted to see her bedroom. I said yes. During the tour, she talked about how she chose the color for her room and bedding, sharing that her favorite color is purple. I noticed that Michelle's room was neat and clean. When I asked how she makes her bed, Michelle responded that her mom makes it for her. Michelle's mom mentioned that she often needs to remind Michelle when it's time to change the sheets. Otherwise, she wouldn't do it. I then inquired if Michelle could do her laundry. She explained that her mother takes her laundry home to wash for her. It was discussed that Michelle has never had the opportunity, but if that someone was there documenting or telling her each step, she'd be able to follow. Michelle does not have any physical disabilities that require someone to do her laundry for her. In the kitchen, Michelle showed me a cleaning schedule located on her fridge. She marks off each item on her schedule when she finishes it. And her mom confirmed that Michelle consistently marks off each completed task. I saw that one of the tasks was washing her dishes. There were dishes in the dish drying rack. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle washes her dishes and puts them on the drying rack. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle doesn't always check to make sure the dishes are clean and needs reminders to put her dishes away. Michelle's mom reported that usually Michelle will rewash and or put her dishes away when asked. So based on the information I just read, if you were completing the ICAP for Michelle, on the motor skills section on number 3, that is sitting alone for 30 seconds with her head and back straight. She would score a 3. On number 4, she's able to stand alone for at least 5 seconds by holding onto furniture or objects. So she scored a 3. She pulls herself into standing position. She received a 3. She stands alone and walks at least 6 feet. She received a 3. Turns the doorknob and opens the door. She scored a 3. Walks up and down the stairs by alternating feet from step by step. She scored a 0 on that one. She was not able to do that. Social and communication skills. She was able to make sounds or gestures for attention. She received a 3. Reaches for a person whom she wants. She scored a 3. She was able to turn her head toward the speaker when her name was called. She was able to have that interaction with the speaker. So she received a 3. She was able to imitate actions. So she scored a 3. She was able to shake her head or otherwise indicate yes or no in response. For example, do you want some milk? She scored a 3 on that one. Says at least 10 words that can be understood by someone he or she knows. Knowing that she's had this conversation with the speaker, she got 3 on that one. She was able to ask simple questions. She received a 3. Speaks in 3 or 4 word sentences. She scored a 3 because she was having that conversation. Offers to help others. Holds the door for those when they hold the door open for one whose arms are full or picks up an object dropped by someone else. She scored a 3. In the personal living skills, she washes and dries dishes and puts them away. She doesn't always do that, so she got a 2 on that one. Cleans bedroom on number 17. She got a 0 based on the information. And the fact that she received a 1 on number 19 because she would be able to do that if given direction. Community living skills, number 2. She was able to find her way to a specific room. She got a 3.
Jamie,
Yes.
can you add that to the chat again? I can't seem to add the attachment. And some of the folks don't have it.
Okay. Hold on. You can do that.
I can't open that up for some reason.
Oh, you can't open it
I was
through
going
the
to ask
chat?
Jamie, if you add an attachment, it usually is not accessible to anybody outside of the state.
Okay.
So it'll probably have to be emailed.
Okay. we'll have to email that to you guys. I apologize for that. Wasn't aware of that. I don't know if Heather, you can send that to some of them that are requesting it. Otherwise, I'll do it after this training. Okay. So now some more information is given. I reviewed the demographic information on the first page of the ICAP booklet. I asked Michelle when her birthday was. Michelle said January. Michelle sat there looking at the examiner. Michelle's mom then whispered the day, which Michelle repeated. Michelle's mom whispered the year, which Michelle repeated. So because of that, she received a 1 because she could state only part of it without prompting. Before meeting with Michelle, I looked in her file to ensure there were no restrictions on food. I gave Michelle a Hershey kiss and asked if she could unwrap it. She unwrapped that candy, so she received a 3. I placed 5 M&Ms on the table in front of Michelle. I asked her if she could pick up the M&Ms. Michelle responded yes and picked them up and held them in her hands. I demonstrated passing the M&Ms between my hands and asked her if she could do the same. Michelle successfully passed the M&Ms back and forth between her hands. Next, I put a pill bottle on the table in front of Michelle and asked if she could put the M&Ms in the bottle. Michelle was able to pick up the M&Ms and place them inside the bottle. I asked her if she could take the M&Ms out of the container. Michelle picked up the pill bottle and dumped the M&Ms onto the table, causing some to fall on the floor. Finally, I asked Michelle if she could hand me the pill bottle. She picked it up and handed it to me. So based on that information, on number 1, picks up small objects, she received a 3. On number 2, transferring the small objects from hand to hand, she received a 3. Putting them in the container for number 6 and taking them out, she received a 2. And then for social and communication skills, number 5, hands, toys, or other objects to another person, she received a 3. I gave Michelle a pen, a paper, Sorry about that, guys. I gave Michelle a pen, a pair of scissors, and a sheet of paper with a line and a box. I wrote her name above the box and asked if she could write her name inside the box. Michelle successfully did that. Next, I asked if she could cut along the line on her paper. She struggled with this and ended up cutting about 1/2 inch away from the line instead. I then handed Michelle a piece of paper, an 8x10, and asked if she could write a letter to her mother. Michelle wrote her name 5 times on the paper. After that, I demonstrated how to fold the letter into 3 equal parts and place it in the envelope. Michelle managed to fold the top quarter of the paper, but had difficulty fitting it in the envelope. Finally, I gave Michelle a piece of thread and a sewing needle, asking her if she could thread a needle. She attempted this 5 times, but became frustrated and put the thread and needle back on the table. I asked Michelle what she would do if her zipper broke on her jacket. Michelle stated that she would throw it away. So for motor skills on number 8, scribbles or marks with a pen or crayon, she was able to do that. So number 3, she received a 3. Number 13, cuts with scissors along a thick straight line. She cut about 1/8 inch on each side of the line. So she received a 1. Number 14, she was able to print her name from an example. She received a 3, but she received a 0 for number 16 on folding a letter into 3 equal sections. And she received a 0 on 17 for threading a sewing needle. Social and communication skills. On number 17, write, prints, or types understandable and legible notes for letters for mailing. She received a 0 because she just stated the same thing over and over again. Personal living skills for number 21, repairs minor damage to clothing. She received a 0. She was going to throw it away. I showed Michelle a book from my kit and asked her to point to the house, dog, tree, and car. She was able to point to all of those in the book, and so she received a 3 on number 7 in social communication skills. I showed Michelle a document displaying common signs and symbols. When I pointed to the women's bathroom sign, Michelle identified it correctly as the women's bathroom. I then pointed to the men's bathroom sign, and she confirmed it was the men's bathroom. When asked which one she would use, Michelle pointed to the women's bathroom sign. Next, I pointed to the railroad crossing sign, but Michelle was uncertain about its meaning. Similarly, when I pointed to the poison sign, she did not know what it represented. However, when I pointed to the stop sign, Michelle accurately named it and explained its purpose. I pointed to the walk sign. Michelle said this means she can walk. I pointed to the do not walk sign. Michelle said this means she can't cross the road. Lastly, I pointed to the fire extinguisher. Although Michelle couldn't identify its name, she mentioned that it was used to put out fires. I asked if Michelle could take walks by herself. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle walks around in her immediate neighborhood, but does not always look both ways before crossing the street. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle doesn't have the safety skills to walk further than her immediate neighborhood by herself. Michelle's working on pedestrian safety skills. I asked Michelle if she had ever used a ladder. She shared that she was afraid of heights and would never want to climb a ladder. Michelle also uses a handrail when climbing stairs for balance. After discussion, it was decided that since Michelle has issues with balance at times, it would not be safe for her to climb a ladder. I asked Michelle if she could climb the steps of a slide that was about 6 feet. She said that she'd be afraid to do that. The same discussion was had as climbing a ladder above. So for motor skills, number 12, climbs a 6-foot ladder, she received a 0. Social and communication skills, number 14, which was responds appropriately to most common signs, printed words or symbols. She was able to recognize and also had the skill to respond accordingly to most. So she was given a 2. Community living skills, number 8, crossing nearby residential roads and unmarked intersections alone, she received a 2. I asked Michelle what her favorite movie was. She said The Nightmare Before Christmas. I asked Michelle if she could tell me about the movie. Michelle knew the characters, but not all the story, and her mom needed to give her prompts to tell the story. So for social and communication skills, number 15, summarizes and tells a story. She received a 2. I asked Michelle how she contacts her friends and family. She showed me her phone, where the names and phone numbers were saved in her contacts. Michelle's mom mentioned that she entered the names and phone numbers for Michelle. When I asked Michelle what she would do if she wanted to go to a movie, she replied, I would ask my mom. I then inquired if there was another way she could find information about movies, and she said, no, I would ask my mom. Finally, I asked Michelle what she would do if the water didn't work when she tried to turn it on. She said she would call her mom. So social and communication skills for number 16, locates or remembers telephone numbers. She scored a 3. But for 18, locating needed information and a yellow page or want-at, she scored a 0. She was going to call her mom. And number 19, calls for repair services for the caretaker. She would tell her mom. So she scored a 0. I asked Michelle about her favorite foods, and she mentioned that she likes pizza, chips, and hamburgers. When I inquired whether she knew how to make hamburgers, she replied that she didn't feel comfortable using the stove by herself and needed someone to ensure that the meat is cooked thoroughly. Michelle's mom noted that Michelle isn't safe when using the stove. She has accidentally left it on after cooking, turning on the wrong burner, and even burnt herself by touching something in the oven without using oven mitts. Michelle mentioned that if someone is not available to her, she can prepare easy mac by filling it with water, microwaving, and stirring in the cheese. I asked Michelle what utensils she used to eat. She said she uses a fork. And I asked her what she does if she's eating a large piece of meat. She said she uses a knife to cut it. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle uses a table knife when cutting food. I asked if Michelle uses an electric mixer or blender when cooking or baking. She replied that she's scared of using those types of appliances independently. Michelle did say that if someone is there helping her, sometimes she will try. Lastly, I asked her what she would prepare for dinner if her parents came over for supper, and she said that she would make easy mac for them. I asked Michelle if she would make anything else, and she said no. So for personal living skills, number 1, swallows soft food, she received a 3. For 2, picks up and eats food such as crackers, she received a 3. For number 5, eats solid foods with a spoon with little spilling, she received a 3. Because she uses a fork. Number 13, cuts food with a knife instead of trying to eat pieces that are too large, she received a 3. Number 6, mixes and cooks simple foods such as scrambled eggs, soup, or hamburger, she received a 2. Plans and prepares and serves a main meal for more than 2 people, which is 20, she received a 0. So then for 16 and 18, we know that she can't score item 16, 18, she can't have a higher score than that. Community living skills, operates potentially dangerous electrical hand tools. On number 13, she has received a 0. Michelle mentioned that she needed to use the bathroom. She wanted went to her bathroom but did not shut the door. I also noticed that Michelle did not wash her hands when she left the bathroom, prompting her mom to remind her to go back and wash them. While Michelle was in the bathroom, I asked her mom if Michelle had any issues with incontinence, to which her mother replied that she did not. I then inquired whether Michelle could wash and dry her hair independently. Her mom explained that she often needs to remind Michelle to do it. I also asked Michelle's mom if Michelle dresses herself without assistance. Her mom stated that Michelle can dress herself, but requires reminders to choose appropriate clothing for the weather. She mentioned that Michelle sometimes leaves the house in winter wearing shorts. For personal living skills, number 3 holds arms and legs out. She received a 3. For number 4, holds hands under running water to wash them when placed in front of a sink. She received a 3. 6, stays dry for at least 3 hours. She received a 3. Number 7, removes pants and underpants. She received a 3. Number 8, uses the toilet at regular times. When placed on the toilet or when taken to the bathroom, she received a 3. For number 9, she puts on a t-shirt or a pullover shirt, although it may be on backwards. She received a 3. And number 10, uses the toilet, including removing clothing with no more than one accident per month. She received a 3. Number 11, closes the bathroom door when appropriate. Before using the toilet, she received a 0. Dresses herself completely and neatly, including shoes, belts, zippers, buttons. She received a 1. 14, washes, rinses, dries hair. She scored a 2. Michelle wanted to show me pictures of her family. She got a few different pictures from around her apartment to show me. When she was done, she put them back where she got them. Community living skills. Number 1, finds toys or objects that are kept in the same place. She scored a 3. Michelle's mother serves as her guardian and representative payee, managing her finances by depositing money into an account for her. Michelle has a debit card for making small purchases, while her mother oversees the funds in her checking account and pays all of Michelle's bills. I placed fake money on the table, explained that I wanted to see if she could tell me how much change she get back when she buys something. I used the scissors on the table as an example. I told Michelle that scissors cost $3.25. I had her give me a $5 bill. I asked Michelle if she could tell me how much change she could get back. She looked at the money on the table and moved it around. She moved 2 quarters towards me. I asked if Michelle buys pops or snacks from a vending machine. She reported that she likes to get pop from the vending machine when she is at school. Michelle likes stickers, one put on her water bottle. She purchases a lot of stickers on Amazon. Michelle is now selling some of her stickers. She sets a price for the different objects and sells them to people she meets and knows. So for community living skills, number 6, trade something for money or another item of value. She scored a 3. For number 7, buys items from a vending machine. She scored a 3. 12, correctly counting change from $5 bill after making a purchase. She received a 0. Number 15, for budgeting money, because her mom does it, she received a 0. Number 18, receives bills in the mail and pays them, because her mom does that, it's a 0. And balances checkbook monthly. Mom also does that, it's a 0. I spoke with Michelle's mom about medical appointments. Her mom mentioned that she keeps track of Michelle's appointments and schedules them accordingly. If she wasn't reminded about her appointments or picked up, Michelle would not attend. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle is not able to tell time. Someone goes with her to medical appointments. Community living skills. Number 4, stay in unfinished yard for 10 minutes. She received a 3. Number 11, using a watch or clock to do something in correct time. She received a 0. 14, writes down if necessary and keeps appointments at least 3 days in advance. She received a 0. I asked Michelle if she could go grocery shopping by herself. She said that she usually goes with someone. When I inquired about whether she makes a shopping list before going, Michelle stated that she needs help to plan her meals for the week and creates a list of items she needs to buy. Her mom mentioned that Michelle needs assistance with spelling the words correctly and ensuring she writes down everything necessary. I also asked if she carries her groceries. Michelle explained that she does carry them and uses the elevator. The motor skills, number 15, picks up and carries a full bag of groceries. She received a 3. Number 18, in personal living skills, prepares a shopping list for at least 6 items. She received a 0. I then asked Michelle and her mom if she had ever had to put a piece of furniture together, such as a small table that comes in a box. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle hasn't had the opportunity to do that. I asked if they felt Michelle would be able to complete it or if she would need help. Michelle's mom said that Michelle has not used any tools and would need someone to read the instructions to provide full assistance to complete the task. So for number 18 on motor skills, assembles objects, she received a 0. I asked Michelle what activities she enjoys participating in. She mentioned that she likes going to the library, being active, and shopping at the mall. Occasionally, she goes to movies with her friends. However, Michelle's mom reported that when they are at the movies, Michelle tends to laugh and talk loudly, which can upset people around her. She often needs to be reminded to be quiet, and sometimes she continues talking even after being asked to stop. In fact, there have been a couple instances where she was asked to leave the theater. When I inquired about snacks at the movies, Michelle said she enjoys getting popcorn and a Coke. I asked if she could wait in line to order, and she admitted that she doesn't like to wait. My mom noted that Michelle frequently goes to the front of the line, repeatedly asking if she can order. This has been a consistent behavior every time they go to the movies. So for number 11, under social and communication skills, waits at least 2 minutes to turn in a turn. Waits 2 minutes for a turn. She scored a 0. Norma 13 acts appropriately without drawing negative attention while in public places. She received a 1. I asked Michelle if she could go to bed in the morning. She laughed and responded she goes to bed at night. So for community living skills, number 5, morning and night, she received 3. I asked Michelle, I asked if Michelle was asked to get 3 items, for example, chips, paper towels, and milk. Would she be able to find the items in the store and purchase it? Michelle's mom laughed and said she could and would also come out with a Coke. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle uses her debit cards and she wouldn't know if she received the correct change back. So for community living skills number 9, buying specific items requested on an errand, she received a 3. Michelle shared that she's working for Special Olympics. Michelle's mom shared that this is a job through project skills. Michelle said that she hopes she can keep working there when she's done with her work trial. Michelle puts information packets together, shreds, and folds brochures. I asked if Michelle had to fill out an application interview for a job. Michelle said that her teacher helped her fill out the application. Michelle's mom reported that the application needed to be read to Michelle. She needed help with answering the questions and with spelling and writing. Michelle said she didn't have to interview for the job. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle's working on interviewing skills at school. I asked if Michelle would remain on task and keep working for at least 2 hours. Michelle's mom reported that Michelle struggles with staying on task, and Michelle's mom reported that Michelle needs frequent prompting to get back to work. So for community living skills, number 16, works at a steady pace on a job for at least 2 hours. She received a 0. And number 7, completing applications and interviews for a job, she received a 1. And that is our scenario. So we have some time for some questions if anyone has any.
There was a question in the chat on motor skills section number 18,
Okay.
and what we would put in the kit for that. Assembling up.
The kit for hold on.
To test that.
Oh,
I think in this scenario we just had a discussion about it.
yeah. In this scenario we did. I think that would be a hard one to have them do and observe unless they were possibly at work. Anybody on here have any examples that they have had people use for that? Number 18. Jenna, were you going to ask a question or are you going to answer that question?
I was going to ask a question.
Okay.
I can answer that a little bit. Some things that I have used in the past have just been like, like if they got like something like, I'm trying to think of like a nightstand or a small shelf.
Okay.
Could they follow that? Use a screwdriver, screw in a couple bolts, a nightstand, things like that's probably a bigger item. But if you can think of something smaller, I mean, that's kind of how I've done that in the past.
Yep. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Jenna.
No, that's fine.
What was your question?
My question was on the first example that you went through. Can you explain, okay, so it says that the person or the coordinator was over there at their apartment. The
Mhm.
coordinator dropped their ICAP kit and all the supplies went across the floor. The person did not go and pick them up or like help assist. Why would that be scored a 3?
You caught that, huh? Yeah, I was thinking, you might have, I wouldn't have scored that a 3.
Okay,
It would-
like a 2 probably because
Yeah.
I'd seen the door opening, you know, she held the door open, which
She
she's got
did.
some of that skill, but not the full thing. So, okay.
Yep. I would agree with what you said on that, Jenna.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you for bringing that up. I see, okay. There's a question in the chat and then I see a raised hand. So I'm gonna go to clarification on motor skill 4 and the use of a cane walker. So that was by Jamie. That wasn't in the scenario, that was in the actual presentation, Jamie, is that correct?
Presentation.
Okay, thank you. And what type of clarification?
Just when we were going through it, I thought that you said that they wouldn't be able to use, like if they had to use a cane or a walker, that it would be scored 0.
Oh. Hold on 1 second, I want to get to that.
But then when I'm reading it, I'm reading it as it's standing by holding on to something for support. So I'm just wondering why they couldn't use a cane or a walker.
Okay, so let me see if I'm getting your question clear. So in number 4, where it says stands for at least 5 seconds by holding on to furniture or other objects, and you're saying that why couldn't they use a cane or walker? Is that?
Yes. As their support for standing.
Could I share for a second on that? I misread that at first. I misread that at first, and I'm wondering if the same didn't happen. Because it says then it couldn't be a score of 0. So if they're holding themselves up on the cane or walker, then you wouldn't put a 0. I kind of read that the opposite the first time I read it. Like I was thinking it said you couldn't. They
I
couldn't
think-
use that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
That's what I
So-
was just wanting was clarification on it because I was kind of confused.
No, that's perfect. I want you to ask questions. So yes, they wouldn't score a 0.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris, for chiming in there and helping out. I'm going to go to Heidi because Heidi has her hand up.
Thank you. I might have misread this on the examples, but I was looking at example for the motor skills. Number 13 cuts along a straight line within an eighth of an inch. Well, actually, I think the example said she did cut within an eighth of an inch, but it was scored as 1 instead of 3. Did I read that the right way?
I thought I caught that too. Hold on 1 second. I want to get back to the scenario. So what it should be is if they're within an eighth of an inch on either side, it should be a 3.
Right.
Okay. So then, I think, trying to find where that's at in the example.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have them in front
No,
of me. I
you're fine.
just saw it on the screen.
Yeah, it should be if since they were within a 8. So I think let me read that again. I read you part of the blue because I misread myself, and that was just the instructions from the actual guidelines. So,
I
if you
see.
go,
I
yeah,
misunderstood that. Sorry.
I did too, Heidi. So I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking the same thing. If you go back up to the example, she struggled with this and ended up cutting about a half an inch away from the line instead. So when I misread it. So because she was a half inch away, that's why she's a 1. If she was an 1/8 inch away, it would have been a 3. You are correct. I read
Got
it
it.
wrong.
No, yeah,
Yep.
no problem. I just didn't have it in front of me, and so I just missed that. Thank you.
No, me too. Okay, any other questions? Julie, your hand's up. Julie, if you're talking, you're muted. If you're not wanting to talk, then I won't keep calling on you. Julie Miller, I should say. I don't know how many Julies are on here. Okay, I'm gonna go to Casey. Your hand is raised.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
On number 4, the community living skills, you said 12,
Can you hear me?
15, and 18 were connected, correct?
Okay.
Can you hear-
Uh,
Can you hear me now?
I can, Julie. If you hold on 1 second, I'm gonna answer Casey's question, then I'll go right back to you, okay? Now, Casey,
Okay.
you're talking about in community living.
Mhm. Number 12, 15, and 18, you said were correlated?
15, 18, and 19 are correlated, yes.
Okay, well, here's a question. I have one person who is their own payee, but they only check their account online.
So I guess I would have to go into more when they check it, are they able to do, so I'm assuming you would say on number 12 that it
And
was a 0?
well, yeah, and he's not good with that. Yeah. He did
Yeah,
not do a
okay.
3 on that, but yet he pays his bills on time. So that's,
So then on 15, he's not able to budget though.
no, I mean, no, he pays his bills. He's his own payee, pays all of, his rent, utilities, cable. He does all of that, but he cannot, correctly count from a $5 bill.
Well, and I would assume that through, he's learned a skill to be able to pay that online, right? Or to be able to pay the bills. He's learned that skill.
Yes.
So I would score 18 based on what he's able to do. Even if he's not able to do 12.
Okay.
Because he's learned something to be able to do that.
Okay.
Did you have another question, Casey?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right, I'll go to Julie then. Julie
Okay.
Miller.
Here's my question. On the community living skills, it's number, I had it. Using the vending machine.
Oh, yep. Number 7.
Number 7, buys items from the vending machine. Are you requiring them to also retrieve their change when they put change in? Because so many individuals with disabilities don't always get that piece where they're supposed to get their change.
Yeah, no, they're not. That is not a requirement that they get their change. it's whether or not they can understand that they put,
Something in.
that they're able to select and get something from a vending machine.
Okay. I just
mean,
didn't know
They
if
say,
that piece should be thrown in at some time so that they know that they gotta get their change back. You know what I mean?
yeah, so the example, of course, is saying, or the guidelines are saying if given the correct change, correct amount of money, but the skill is understanding that they're able to buy it from there. So they're going to put something in and get something out. We're not necessarily getting change. So no.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Jenna, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Mandy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering for individuals who can go to the bathroom independently, but they need help with like cleanup afterwards if they were to have a bowel movement. Question number 10 on number 3. How would you score someone?
Number 10 on, oops, I'm in the wrong section. Hold on. They're using the toilet, including removing and replacing clothing with no more accidents per month.
Yeah, they go to the bathroom independently, but they'll need help with like cleanup after a bowel movement.
Okay. So, I would, and they're able to remove and replace clothing if they have an accident, those things.
Yeah.
So it's basically just the fact that they can't do the part. So I would rate that as in the toileting part. And so I would rate that as your weakest piece. So if they're not able to ever do it, or if they're able to sometimes do it, does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Thank you.
Yep. Terry.
Can we go back and review that question that Casey had, Jamie, about balancing a checkbook and paying bills?
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that, because historically, now there could be a change in that and how the division looks at that, but historically 12 was, the initiation of money skills, right? They have
Right.
money skills, they have the skill to make change and such. In the event that if we allow credit, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but that is a high skill. That number 19 is the highest skill in that area. And if we look at the ICAP, as we've talked about throughout today, it's based upon the easiest skill all the way up, right? All the way,
Yes.
so if a person may be able to pay their bills and such because they get them because that's a routine thing, but 12 really ties into money, understanding money, counting change, etc. So I just want to caution, if that's something that we're going to do, that could have some effect upon ICAPs and people receiving scores that could affect them adversely, because 12 has always been about the foundation of understanding money. And so even though there may be systems in place and they're paying a bill because they know how to pay a bill, but do they really understand if they got a bill incorrectly in the mail? Do they read the bill? Do they know if it's incorrect? And the scenario could be they normally get a bill for $500 and the bill all of a sudden was an error and it was for 50. Are they going to recognize that 50 and 500 is different? So I just want to caution that, as are we really saying now within how we're looking at the ICAP that really that 12 does not correlate to 15, 18, and 19, because in the ICAP guidelines it does say it has to correlate. So I just want to throw that out there, because I think we could be making some big changes for some of our participants.
Can they use a calculator?
Oh yeah, absolutely, we did. We always said that before.
Okay, that wasn't mentioned, so I just want to double check.
I mean, we always allowed that before if they were counting change, to use a calculator, but just some food for thought on that. I just want to point that out.
And I think that might need some more discussion that we have to do here on that. I would agree that 19 in, because that's balancing a checkbook. I would agree that being able to pay your bills doesn't mean you balance your checkbook, right? I don't balance mine to this day and I pay my bills, right? And so I guess those questions that Terry is bringing up and things to think about is, would that person be able to know that there's a difference in if they received a different type of bill? So Casey, I guess that would require some more thought in like, how much does he know and able to do? And rather than like, I have a bill that comes out every month that is the same amount, right? I'm gonna have to think about that one, but it would really have to be, I guess I should have asked a few more questions on that, Casey.
Yeah, and he has overdrafted a few times too, and so
So that makes me think though, then, so really think about like those skills he has, because if he's overdrafted, then is he able to make those bills? So yeah, they
well,
do
that would be
for it.
nice, but I have no access to that. I just have to go by what he tells me.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Heather.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Just since we're on the topic of the budgeting and money and such. So in this scenario, just for some clarification, this person, Michelle, had a rep payee. So if anybody has a rep payee, should those like the 15, 18, 19, I think it was,
Yeah.
should those all be a zero then, since they have a rep payee? And the rep payee makes sure the bills are paid and budgeted and stuff. So should all those be a zero? Or does there have
Well,
to be?
I don't know if on 12 that for sure, just because you have a rep payee, because that's about
Right.
should.
Yep.
But for 15, 18, and 19, then if they have a rep payee, I would assume then that would be zero. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Jamie, it's Barb, but I would keep in mind you can have a rep payee and have a job, and you now have personal finances that you could be dealing with some of those monetary issues and still have a rep payee.
Yeah, it would all depend on if they're paying, like if there's what they're using that other finance
So like
for.
if they had like a personal account that they balance themselves,
Yes. If
so
they
we would take
balance,
that into consideration. Okay. Understandable.
if they're paying something, or yeah.
Thank
Jamie,
you.
can I follow up with that? Could I kind of ask a question with that?
Sure.
So I was always told, yes, even if they have a rep payee, if you give them like weekly spending, like a $30 weekly spending, and they budget that through the whole week of what they wanted, we could use that on 15. Should we not be using that anymore? Because they do have a payee. It's just they get a weekly budgeted amount.
So I think it depends on what they're doing with it, right? So I think like 15 is talking about they're covering expenses for at least 1 week. So we're not talking about just going to the store and buying something. We're talking about if they're budgeting it out for multiple items, right? So that depends if they're able to do, if they're doing that with that, oh, then maybe, I mean, that would be something to think about, right? But if they're just have that as their spending money and you don't like they're really just not spending it more than, maybe they're just buying a pop every once in a while. That all depends. The same thing with 18 and 19. If they're using that money they have for an allowance to pay a bill, that's different. I don't know that they're able to do that, and it would be maybe more than one bill, right? And 19, of course, I don't think that they're balancing a checkbook with that, but that's just my assumption. So it would really depend on that individual and what they're doing with that other money. It's not like a hard and fast on that one, but you would have to really look at what they're doing with it. Okay, we got about 5 minutes and we got a few more questions. So I'm going to go with Nikki. I think Nikki.
I was just going to say that the people that I work with, they choose their monthly budget for the most part, the ones that can anyway. So once we figure out their income and what their bills are, so then what's left, they choose like, what is my dining out money? How much can I use? Rec activities, so if they want to do like $20 for rec activities and stuff like that. So some people are very involved in their budget. Not really, I mean, aside from the bills too.
Did you have a question or were you just, because
I
that's
was
good
just making a statement.
Okay, thank you. That was very good information. Chris?
Sorry, we got a little far out from it, but like going back to that original, where they're receiving bills and paying them in the mail. What I've found through experience with these is even if I think that, there's some underlying reason why they're successful there that we're not thinking of. One being, they just always have so much money in there and they don't like that. This person might just be so, they don't ever get anything new. They don't, vary outside of their budget that's been set for a long, long time. And, not because of budgeting skills, but they just don't have overdrafts and it works out for them, not because they know how to count change and know how to do those money skills. So like there's a lot of times that there's something else that's affecting the fact that they're successful in there. So I just wanted to throw that in.
That's very good information too. Thank you. Appreciate that. Tiffany?
Mine is completely separate. Hi, sorry. So I don't know if I read it wrong and I can't see it for the example, but on motor skills, it was walks up and down stairs by alternating feet from step to step, may hold handrail, and I believe she got a 0 on that, but she did go up the stairs, so I am confused on what I missed. And I can't see it, so I don't remember. But I remember when I saw it, I was...
Nope, hold on 1 second. So I can't find it either, but I know what you're talking about. If they are able to alternate feet going up and down the stairs, they are, and they can hold the handrail. So you are correct on that. I don't remember what the example said.
But she got a score of 0.
Yeah, she probably shouldn't have. Might have been a mistake on our end.
Okay.
We'll get that corrected. We'll look at this and make sure it's all corrected. We will send this out to you guys, but I want to make sure it's corrected. Okay, we have like a minute left, and I want to thank you guys all for coming and attending and the questions. I don't think we got through all of your questions, so I'm going to please encourage you to send. You can either call myself or Stephanie Boujon or Heather Burton, or you can email us. That information. We would love to be able to answer any questions you have or talk through any situations like that you're working through. So please reach out. And hopefully this helped a little bit. I will tell you, I'm working on getting the first training up on the portal. I checked again today. Hopefully it's going soon. This one will also go up there for your reference. And then, like I said, we'll send out this example and this information to you after this meeting, so you have it. And then this one will go up on the portal also. All right. Thank you guys. Have a great day.